Devonte Price was 34 years old, and until that Saturday morning, he believed that loving someone completely was its own reward. He was a union electrician, calloused hands, 4 a.m. alarms, a man who showed up and never complained. When his wife Brianna told him she needed $24,000 in cosmetic surgery to feel like herself again, he didn't hesitate. He sold the truck his late father helped him rebuild. He worked double shifts 6 days a week until the money was there. He gave her everything, without conditions, without resentment, without a second thought. 6 weeks after her surgery healed, Brianna looked at him across their kitchen and told him, in a calm and rehearsed voice, that she was too pretty for him now, that he couldn't keep up with who she had become. Then she said there was no one else, and her eyes moved 1 second too late. What Devonte discovered that evening, on a phone she left unattended, didn't just expose a betrayal. It revealed exactly how long she had been planning it, and who had been helping her. He said nothing. He put the phone down exactly where he found it, and in that silence, something in Devonte Price went completely still. What came next, she never saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The kitchen was dark at 4:47 in the morning. Devonte Price moved through it without turning on a light. He didn't need to. 5 years in this house had put everything exactly where his hands expected it to be. The thermos on the second shelf, the coffee already set on a timer, the work boots lined up by the back door like soldiers waiting on orders. He sat on the wooden step and laced them up slowly. His lower back had been talking to him for 3 weeks now. Not screaming, just a low, steady conversation he'd learned to ignore the way other men ignored debt. You acknowledged it, you managed it, and then you went to work anyway. That was the deal he'd made with his body a long time ago, and his body had held up its end so far. He stood, lifted the thermos, and headed for the door. Outside, the neighborhood was still sleeping. Porch lights glowed orange down the block. Somebody's sprinklers had come on early, ticking quietly in the dark. Devonte walked to his truck, set the thermos on the roof while he unlocked the door, and paused for just a second, the way he always did, the way he couldn't fully explain. The truck was a 2019 Silverado, reliable, practical, nothing special. Not like the other one. The other truck had been a 1994 Chevy, white over tan, rebuilt from a rusted shell. His father's project and then, after his father passed, his own. 12 years of weekends under the hood, replacing what broke, restoring what had been lost. It ran like new by the time Devonte was done with it. He used to just sit in it sometimes, not going anywhere. Just sitting, with his hands on the wheel, in the particular quiet of something that had come back from nothing. He sold it 6 months ago. $3,100 toward the total. He didn't tell Brianna what the truck meant. It didn't seem like information that would help. She had come to him with a brochure, sat down across the kitchen table with it folded in her hands like she was presenting a case, which, in a way, she was. Her voice was careful, a little rehearsed. Rhinoplasty, augmentation, body contouring, a package from a clinic 2 towns over that she had clearly been researching for a while. $24,000, she said, out of pocket. He looked at her face while she said it. Underneath the rehearsed calm, there was something that actually hurt. A real wound, something left over from the miscarriage 2 years back that had never properly healed. She'd changed after that, turned inward, started looking at her own reflection like it was something she was trying to recognize. He understood grief. He understood the way it bent toward the body sometimes when it couldn't find anywhere else to go. So he didn't hesitate. He picked up every overtime shift his foreman would give him, 6 days a week for 4 months. He sold the truck. He moved money around, and he made it work. And he never said one word about the cost, Not the financial kind, and not the other kind. The surgery happened in February. Brianna came home wrapped and swollen, and he took a week off to take care of her. Changed her dressings, got up in the night when she needed water, sat with her through the worst of the discomfort without complaint. By March, she was moving through the house like a woman who had reclaimed something. By April, she had stopped looking at him the same way. It started small. The phone, always face down on the counter. The way her laughter changed when she was on the back porch, getting air. Lighter, quicker, meant for someone he couldn't see. 3 girls' nights in a single month, when there had never been 3 in a year. The dinner table going quiet, in a way that used to feel comfortable, and now just felt like space where something used to live. He told himself it was adjustment. Recovery wasn't just physical. He knew that. She was finding herself in this new version of her body. That took time. That was okay. He was a patient man. Patience was something he was genuinely good at. He just kept going to work. He came home at 6:18 that evening after 14 hours on a commercial site. Knees stiff, hands marked up from conduit work, the kind of tired that lived in the bones, and not just the muscles. The kitchen was dark. The stove was cold. Brianna was on the couch with her legs tucked under her, phone in her hand, the blue light of the screen painting the side of her face in the dim room. Quiet music came from somewhere. She was scrolling. She did not look up when he came in. He stood in the doorway for a moment, still in his work jacket, thermos hanging from 2 fingers. He watched her in the blue light, this woman he had rebuilt himself around, who had not yet turned her face toward the sound of him coming home. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, in the dark, watching. The Saturday morning came in slow and golden. Light pushed through the curtains in long, flat strips. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started up and then cut off again. The neighborhood had that particular weekend quiet. Not empty, just unhurried. Devante was up first. He always was. He made coffee, scrambled 2 eggs, and left a plate on the counter for Brianna the way he always did on Saturdays. Old habit. The kind that survives on its own, even when the feeling behind it starts to thin. When she came downstairs, she was already put together. Not dressed for brunch exactly, but done. Hair, makeup, clothes that fit her new body like she'd planned the whole morning around being looked at. She moved through the kitchen with a kind of ease that had become familiar over the past 6 weeks, like she was comfortable in herself, in a way that no longer included him in the picture. She didn't touch the eggs. "I was thinking," Devante said, leaning against the counter with his mug. "We go to Millie's. Do the usual. Millie's Soul Kitchen. Their spot since before they were married. Corner booth, sweet tea, shrimp and grits on the weekend menu. The kind of place that held 4 or 5 years of ordinary Saturdays inside its walls." Brianna turned from the counter and looked at him. That was when he felt it. Not hostility. Not irritation. Something quieter and more final than either of those things. She looked at him the way you look at something you are deciding whether to pack or leave behind. Measured. Already past the point of sentiment. She set her mug down. "Dev." She said his name gently, like a courtesy. "I think we need to talk." He straightened. "Okay. I've been doing a lot of thinking." She folded her hands on the counter, composed, practiced, about where I am, about where I'm going. "And I don't think this is working anymore." The kitchen went very still. "I've changed," she said. "I look in the mirror now, and I actually see who I was supposed to be. That's real. That's not nothing." She paused. "But this life, what we have here, it doesn't match that. It doesn't fit anymore." Devante kept his eyes on her face. He didn't move. "I think I've outgrown it." She said it simply. No cruelty in her voice, which somehow made it worse. "And I think I'm too pretty now for the life we have. Too pretty for you to keep up with." The words landed and sat there on the kitchen tile between them. He held them. Didn't let himself react. Didn't let anything he was feeling travel from his chest to his face. "Is there someone else?" he asked. One question, flat and even. She opened her mouth, and then she stopped. It was barely a second, a single beat of silence where an answer should have already been. Her eyes moved, not much, just a fraction, the way a person's eyes move when they're choosing a path through something instead of just walking straight. "No," she said, just the one word. And then she looked down at the counter. Devante nodded once. He put his mug in the sink. He walked past her, through the living room, and down the short hall to the bedroom. He went inside and closed the door behind him. Not hard, just shut. He sat down on the edge of the bed. The room was quiet. Morning light came through the window at a low angle and lay across the floor in a pale yellow stripe. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the carpet between his feet. He did not cry. He did not put his fist through the wall. He did not go back down the hall and say all the things climbing up his throat. He just sat there, and he let his mind do what it was built to do. The hesitation. One beat. Just one. But he had been reading silences his whole life. In his father, in job foreman, in rooms where something was wrong and nobody wanted to say it first. He knew the difference between a person thinking and a person choosing. That was a person choosing. The phone. Always face down. Always taken to the bathroom. Laughing on the back porch at something she'd angled the screen away to read. 3 girls' nights in a month when there had never been 3 in a year. The way she had filled in lately, not just physically, but socially. New restaurants, new energy, coming home with a glow that had nothing to do with him. He had told himself it was recovery, adjustment, her finding herself. He had been patient. Deliberately, loyally, stubbornly patient. He turned that word over now and looked at the underside of it. Patient. Or just not looking. There was a difference. And sitting there on the edge of the bed, in the quiet of a Saturday morning, he had planned to spend across a corner booth from his wife. Devante decided which one it was going to be from here forward. He would look, before he said a word, before he moved a single inch, before he gave her or anyone else the chance to see him coming. He would look first. He sat there in the still room, and he began going back through every detail that had felt wrong, cataloging each one carefully, the way a man catalogs a fault in a system. Not in anger, but in the cold, focused language of someone who intends to find exactly where the break began. The bath ran for a long time. Devante could hear it through the wall. The pipes in the upstairs bathroom, the low rush of water filling the tub. Brianna had been up there for almost 20 minutes. He hadn't heard the water stop yet. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, in the same spot he'd been in that morning. He hadn't turned on the lamp. The room had gone dim with the evening, and he hadn't bothered to fix that either. Her phone was on the nightstand, face up this time. She had come upstairs, set it down, and walked to the bathroom without thinking. Or maybe she had thought about it and decided it didn't matter anymore. Maybe she figured the conversation this morning had handled everything, that he had accepted it the way she expected him to, quietly and without complication, and that there was nothing left to protect. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up. No password. She hadn't changed it yet, or hadn't thought to, or again, hadn't considered him a threat worth accounting for. The screen lit up blue-white in the dim room. He went to the contacts first. Mona. A name he recognized from the girls' nights. A name she'd used easy and often. But the photo attached to the contact was not a woman. It was a man, somewhere in his mid-30s. Sharp clothes, sharp smile, the kind of photo a man takes when he wants to look like he has somewhere important to be. The name at the top of the profile read Raymond Ashford. Below it, a real estate company logo. Devante opened the thread. He read slowly, carefully, the way he read blueprints, not rushing, because rushing is where you miss the thing that costs you later. The thread went back 4 months. He counted. The surgery had finished healing 6 weeks ago, which meant this thread began 2 months before that, 2 months before she was recovered, while he was still working double shifts, while he was still driving a borrowed truck because he had sold his own father's Chevy to make the payment, while she was still coming downstairs and letting him bring her water and adjust her pillows and ask her twice a day how she was feeling. The messages were what they were. He didn't slow down for those. He kept reading, kept scrolling, kept his hands steady and his face blank and his breathing managed. Then he found the exchange that stopped him. Raymond had written, "When are you going to tell him? You got what you needed from him." Devante's eyes moved to her response. "Soon. Let him enjoy thinking he did something good. He'll survive. He always does." He read it twice. Not because he hadn't understood it the first time. He had understood it completely the first time. He read it twice because he wanted to make sure he had it exactly right. Every word, the order of them, the particular way she had said it, not with guilt, not with conflict, but with the casual ease of a woman discussing a minor inconvenience she had already moved past. He'll survive. He always does. His thumbs were already moving. He opened his own camera. He photographed every screen, the contact, the photo, the thread from the beginning, the exchange, every message that filled in the shape of what this actually was. He worked through it the same way he worked through anything on a job site that needed to be documented before it could be corrected, completely, without shortcuts, without letting his hands betray what was happening behind his eyes. When he was done, he closed her camera app. He checked that he had left no trace, no new notifications, nothing open that hadn't been open before. He placed the phone back on the nightstand in the same position she had left it, angled slightly toward the lamp, exactly as he found it. Then he walked out of the bedroom and down the stairs. In the kitchen, he ran the cold tap and filled a glass and stood at the sink drinking it slowly. Through the window above the sink, the street outside was settling into night. A neighbor's porch light had come on. A car moved past without hurrying. He finished the water, set the glass down. He stood there and breathed, in through his nose, out slow. He did it again and again. He did it until the thing in his chest, the thing that wasn't grief exactly, wasn't rage exactly, but was something that contained both and was larger than either, settled into something he could stand on top of without sinking. He pulled out his own phone. He opened his messages to Walter. He typed one line, "I need you tomorrow. Bring your clear head." He sent it. He put the phone in his pocket. Upstairs, he heard the water finally cut off. He didn't move from the window. He stood there in the dark kitchen, the streetlight casting a pale rectangle across the floor behind him, his face unreadable, his photographs saved, his mind already past the part of this that hurt and moving, slowly, deliberately, without a single wasted step, into something much colder. Walter pulled up at 9:14 in the morning. Devante watched the car from the kitchen window, his brother's dark blue sedan parking clean against the curb. No rushing, no drama. Walter stepped out in a pressed shirt and slacks, like a man who had already decided the terms of the day before it started. Brianna had left an hour earlier. Pilates, she'd said, not looking at him. Then errands. She'd taken her purse and her sunglasses and her new face, and walked out the front door like the house was already a place she used to live. Devante had the coffee ready. He let Walter in without a word. Walter came through the door, looked at him once, a long, reading look, and then walked to the kitchen table and sat down. No small talk, no warm-up. Walter had always been able to read a room faster than anyone Devante knew, and right now the room said, This is serious, and we both know it. Devante set a mug in front of him and sat across the table. He unlocked his phone, opened the photos, and passed it to his brother without saying a word. Walter scrolled. He didn't make noise. He didn't interrupt himself with reactions. He went through the contact, the profile photo, the thread from the beginning, and then the exchange at the end, the one that mattered most. His jaw tightened once. His thumb stopped moving for a moment when he hit Brianna's words. He'll survive. He always does. Walter set the phone down on the table. He picked up his mug. He took one slow sip. He set it back down. 4 months, he said. 4 months, Devante said. Walter was quiet for another moment. Devante could see it happening behind his eyes, the anger arriving, peaking, and then being deliberately set aside like a tool he didn't need for this particular job. Walter didn't waste energy on things that didn't build toward an outcome. Okay, Walter said. Let me see the joint account. Devante opened his laptop and turned it toward his brother. Walter pulled it closer and started going through the transaction history with the same methodical focus he'd brought to the phone. His eyes moved fast. He had spent his entire career reading numbers and knowing what they were hiding. Within 3 minutes, he stopped scrolling and pressed his finger to the screen. There, he said. Devante leaned over. A transfer. $240 moved to an external account. He looked at the date, 10 weeks ago. He looked at the next one, 350, a week later. Then another. Then another. She's been pulling money, Walter said. He kept scrolling. His voice was flat and precise. Not big chunks, small ones, spaced out. So it wouldn't show up as anything. So it wouldn't show up as anything, Walter confirmed. He pulled a small notepad from his shirt pocket, because Walter always had a notepad, and started writing figures down. He added as he went. When he reached the end of the visible transactions, he put his pen down and looked at the number he'd written at the bottom. $6,200, moved in increments small enough to look like ordinary spending, spread across 90 days. Devante stared at the number for a moment. When did it start? Walter checked the date on the first transfer. Then he looked at the thread dates on Devante's phone. Same month, Walter said. He didn't editorialize. He didn't need to. He just said it, and let it sit there. The affair and the account drainage had started at the same time. This was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It was a plan. A quiet, patient, methodical plan, executed by someone who had learned how to be patient by watching the most patient man she knew. Walter closed the laptop gently. I'm calling a daze, he said. Who's that? My attorney. She handles exactly this. I'm calling her right now. He was already picking up his phone. Dev? The house? It's in your name? Your credit? Your down payment? Mine. All of it. Then it's protectable. He stood up from the table. The money she moved, the way a daisy will structure this, that can be treated as an advance against any marital claim. She doesn't get that and a settlement. She already took her piece. She just doesn't know we know that yet. He stepped toward the hallway to make the call. Then he stopped and turned back. Nothing changes on your end. You hear me? You go to work. You come home. You act exactly like you've been acting. His eyes were steady and serious. Don't give her a reason to move faster. Don't tip anything. We build the record first. Devante nodded once. Walter looked at him for a moment longer, the way an older brother looks at someone he would go to war for, and then walked down the hall, phone already to his ear. Walter left just before noon. Devante washed both mugs, dried them, put them back in the cabinet in the exact spots they lived. He picked up his work bag, checked the thermos, and drove to the job site. He worked a full shift. He came home. He ate. He said the small, neutral things that passed for conversation in the house now. Brianna didn't notice anything different. He made sure of it. The job site was a half-finished commercial building on the east side of the city. 3 floors of exposed steel and concrete dust. The smell of cut wire and joint compound hanging in the cold morning air. Devante was in the second-floor mechanical room, running conduit along the east wall. Steady work. The kind that required enough focus to keep your hands busy, but not enough to keep your mind from going where it wanted to go. He had been at it for 2 hours when Deja appeared in the doorway. She was carrying her tool bag and a water bottle, and the specific expression she wore when she had already decided to say something and was just choosing her moment. He had known that face for 3 years. He recognized it the same way he recognized a bad circuit. Something in the air before you even touch the wire. She set her bag down and got to work on the opposite wall without saying anything. That was the thing about Deja. She never rushed toward a moment. She let it come to her. They worked in silence for a while. Measured, marked, drilled. The rhythm of it was comfortable in the way that good working partnerships get comfortable. No wasted motion. No need to explain. Then she said, without looking up from her work, "You want to tell me what's going on with you?" Devante kept running the conduit. "I'm fine." "I didn't ask if you were fine." She glanced over at him. "I asked what's going on." He looked at her. She held the look without blinking. Deja was not someone you deflected easily. She was small and sharp-tongued and had once talked a building inspector out of a failed citation through sheer calm authority, which was more than most journeymen could say. She had been in his corner since the first week of her apprenticeship, and she had earned the right to the direct version. He set down the fish tape. "Brianna's been having an affair," he said. "Has been for about 4 months. She's been pulling money out of our joint account the whole time. Small amounts, timed so they wouldn't show up as anything." He said it without weight or drama. Just facts, in order. "I found out 6 days ago. My brother's attorney is building the paperwork now." Deja was quiet for a moment. She pressed her lips together, not from hesitation, but from the controlled effort of someone choosing not to say the first 3 things that came to mind. "Okay," she said finally. "Who is he?" "Real estate agent. Raymond Ashford." Something shifted in her face. A flicker of recognition, quick and sharp. "Ashford," she repeated. "You know him?" "I know of him." She reached for her water bottle, took a slow drink. "He tried to sell my cousin Tamara a property about a year ago. House in the Waverly district. Made it sound like the deal was solid. Told her the inspection was clean. Told her the neighborhood was up and coming. Told her a lot of things." She set the bottle down. "Deal fell apart 3 weeks before closing. Turns out there was foundation damage that showed up in a second inspection he'd strongly advised her not to get." Her voice was even, but her jaw was tight. She lost her earnest money. $2,000. Just gone. Devante said nothing. He picked the fish tape back up and kept working. "Let me make some calls," Deja said. It wasn't a question. "Deja, I'm not asking." She turned back to the wall. "I know people. Let me make some calls." She came back 2 days later. They were in the parking lot after the shift ended, the sky going gray and orange behind the tree line. Deja leaned against the side of her truck and read from notes she'd typed into her phone. 3 active contracts Raymond currently had under agreement. All 3 were in trouble. 2 sellers had already quietly consulted with other agents, and 1 was 3 days from a missed contingency deadline. A civil lawsuit filed 8 months ago by a former client. Misrepresentation on a commercial listing. The kind of lawsuit that doesn't settle quietly because the client was angry enough to want it on record. A real estate license currently under review by the State Licensing Board. Pending complaint from a separate transaction. The kind of review that could result in suspension or revocation if the board found sufficient cause. And then Deja looked up from her phone. The car he drives? Leased? The watch he wears? Financed through a credit company that charges 22% interest. She paused. His last verified closed commission was 7 months ago. She put her phone in her pocket and looked at Devante directly. "The whole thing is a costume," she said. "There's nothing underneath it." Devante absorbed every word without blinking. He nodded once, slowly. He tucked what she'd said into the same place he had been storing everything else. Organized, dated, filed. "Thank you," he said. "You're going to use it when the time is right." She nodded. She didn't press him further. That was the other thing about Deja. She knew when her part was done. Devante drove home through the last of the evening light. He kept both hands on the wheel and the radio off. He knew exactly what Raymond Ashford was. He knew exactly what Raymond Ashford had. And he knew what a man with no real foundation looks like when someone pulls one brick loose at exactly the right moment. He pulled into his driveway, cut the engine, and sat in the quiet for a moment. Then he got out and went inside. The coffee shop was a small place on Delaney Street, the kind that had been there for 20 years and didn't bother competing with anything newer. Exposed brick walls, wood tables worn smooth at the edges, the smell of dark roast, and something baking in the back. Devante arrived first. He ordered 2 coffees, black for himself, a vanilla latte for Pat because he remembered, and chose a table near the window, away from the counter noise. He watched the street while he waited. Pat pulled into the lot at 10:02. She was a compact woman, 60 years of life sitting in her posture like ballast. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. She wore a burgundy coat and carried a small purse, and when she pushed through the door and saw him, she gave him the same look she had always given him. Direct, warm, and entirely without pretense. Devante. She squeezed his arm when she reached the table. Not a hug. A grip. Intentional. Aunt Pat. He stood until she sat. Old habit. She appreciated it. He could tell from the brief softening around her eyes. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." She settled into the chair and wrapped both hands around the latte he'd ordered her. "Talk to me." He did. He laid it out the way he laid everything out. In order. Without decoration. The phone. The contact saved under a woman's name with a man's face behind it. The messages going back 4 months. The exact exchange that had stopped him cold. Let him enjoy thinking he did something good. The bank records Walter helped him pull. $6,200. 90 days. Small enough each time to disappear without an alarm going off. He told her all of it. Pat did not interrupt once. She sat with her coffee cooling in her hands, and she listened with the focused stillness of someone who already understood that what they were hearing mattered and deserved to be received correctly. When he finished, the table was quiet. Pat set her cup down. She looked at the window for a moment, not at him, the way people do when they are deciding between 2 kinds of honesty. Then she chose the harder one. "She told me she was unhappy," Pat said. "About 3 months before the surgery. Not unhappy with you. She was careful not to say that. She was talking about herself. Said she felt like she'd lost track of who she was supposed to be." She paused. "She had her reasons. The miscarriage took something from her. I know that. I never pretended it didn't." Devante nodded. "I told her what I believed," Pat continued. "I said you were a good man, and that the kind of feeling she was describing, that restlessness, you work through it. You don't use it as a door." She turned back to face him. She listened very politely and changed the subject. The morning light was thin through the window. Devante kept his hands flat on the table. "There's something else," Pat said. Her voice dropped slightly. Not in volume, in weight. "It was after she'd had the surgery and she was healing. We were talking about the recovery, about how it all looked. She was pleased with herself. You could feel it coming off her." Pat's jaw tightened for just a moment before she smoothed it back. "And she said something I haven't known what to do with since." She looked at him steadily. "She said she was grateful you weren't the type to see things coming. Said it like it was a quality she was fond of. Like your trust was— Pat stopped, found the word she had been looking for, and placed it down carefully. Convenient. The word settled on the table between them like something that couldn't be picked back up. Devante did not move. His face did not change. He sat with it the way he had trained himself to sit with everything in the past 2 weeks, fully, without flinching, without letting the impact push him somewhere he hadn't planned to go. He had worked 60-hour weeks. He had sold his father's truck. He had come home aching in every joint, and still put dinner on the table, and still asked how she was feeling, and still meant it every single time. And she had looked at all of that and seen a gap in the fence she could walk through clean. Pat watched him. She didn't offer comfort, and she didn't fill the silence. She was not that kind of woman. After a moment, Devante looked up. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." When the moment comes, he held her gaze. "I need you there." Pat did not hesitate. She did not ask for details, did not ask what moment or when or what she would be required to say. She had already done the math on all of that the second he called her on Friday. "Yes," she said. Just the one word. Flat and final, and completely without condition. They finished their coffee. They walked out together into the gray morning, and Pat squeezed his arm again in the parking lot before she got into her car. Devante sat in his truck after she pulled out. He stared at the steering wheel for a long moment, both hands resting on his thighs, the engine off. Then he started the truck and drove home. The call from Adayezi came on Monday morning while Devante was on his lunch break, sitting in his truck with the engine running and the heat on low. "Everything is in order," she said. Her voice was precise and unhurried, the voice of a woman who did not use extra words. "The agreement is clean. The house documentation is airtight. The account transfers are logged and time-stamped. When you're ready, we move. I'll let you know by end of week," Devante said. "Take your time, but don't take too long." He thanked her and hung up. He sat for a moment with the phone in his hand and the half-eaten sandwich on the seat beside him, watching a gust of wind push a piece of trash across the empty lot. Then he finished his lunch, clocked back in, finished the day. Tuesday afternoon, 2:15 p.m. Raymond Ashford's office was in a converted row house on Clement Avenue, a narrow 2-story building with fresh white paint and a brushed metal sign out front that read Ashford Premier Realty in raised letters. The sign was new. Devante noticed that. Everything about the exterior had been arranged to suggest arrival, to suggest permanence. He parked at the meter, fed it $2, and walked in carrying a manila folder. The reception area was small but styled carefully. Leather chairs, a glass coffee table stacked with design magazines, a diffuser releasing something that smelled like cedar and money. A young woman at the front desk looked up with a trained smile. "Welcome in. Do you have an appointment?" "I don't," Devante said. "Tell him Devante Price is here. Tell him it's about a property matter." She made the call. 30 seconds of murmuring. Then she looked up and the smile had gone slightly uncertain at the edges. "He can see you for a few minutes. That's all I need." Raymond Ashford was standing when Devante came through the door, positioned behind his desk like a man who had decided the desk was armor. He was tall, well-dressed in a fitted gray shirt and dark trousers, with the kind of face that was built for first impressions. Good teeth, easy smile. The practiced warmth of a man who sold things for a living. The smile was in place when Devante walked in. It started dropping about 2 seconds later, when Raymond registered something in Devante's face, or, more precisely, the complete absence of the thing he had been expecting. There was no anger there, no hurt, nothing to work with. Devante sat down across from him without being invited to. Raymond sat too, slowly, like a man recalibrating. "I don't think we haven't," Devante said. He placed the folder on the desk but did not open it yet. I'll keep this short. I know you're busy. Raymond's eyes went to the folder. Back up. What's this about? Brianna. Devante said her name without weight. Just a fact. I want to make sure we understand each other before things move forward. Raymond opened his mouth. Devante continued. I have the full message thread. Every screen. Dated and documented. He opened the folder now and turned the first page toward Raymond. A printed grid of the message screenshots, timestamps running down the right side. 4 months, starting 6 weeks before her surgery was done healing. Raymond looked at the page. He did not touch it. I also have the financial records, the account transfers. 90 days, 37 separate transactions. Devante turned to the next page. My attorney has originals of everything. The easy confidence Raymond had walked into this conversation with was gone now. He had the look of a man watching a wall come down, not collapsing, not speaking, just watching. Devante turned to the last page. He gave Raymond a moment to read it. It was a clean, single-spaced summary. 3 failed closings. A civil lawsuit filed in October by a former client. Misrepresentation. Seeking damages. A state real estate board review. Opened in September. Currently active. I didn't compile this to embarrass you, Devante said. He folded his hands on the desk. His voice was even. I'm telling you where things stand, because I think it's better if you understand the full picture. He let one beat pass. If your name appears in any legal response Brianna files, if she cites you, references you, or if it becomes clear that you coached her on how to contest the proceedings, this summary goes to the licensing board. Complete. Documented. Attached to a formal inquiry. Raymond's jaw was tight. The veneered smile was entirely gone now, and what was underneath it was exactly what Devante had expected to find. Nothing particularly solid. I'm not threatening you, Devante said. I'm informing you. Those aren't the same thing. He closed the folder, picked it up, and stood. Raymond said nothing. He had the look of a man who understood, on some cellular level, that there was nothing in his inventory that worked on someone who wasn't trying to be sold. Devante walked out without looking back. He nodded to the woman at the front desk. He pushed through the glass door and out into the cold afternoon air. He drove home. That evening, Brianna was in the kitchen when he got in, leaning against the counter, scrolling her phone. She glanced up with the loose, distracted energy she'd been wearing for weeks now, present enough to maintain the surface, gone everywhere else. Hey, she said. You eat? I'll make something. He moved around her to the refrigerator. She watched him for a moment, in the way she had started watching him lately. Not with warmth, but with the mild curiosity of someone waiting for a process to complete. Have you thought about it? She asked. Casual. Light. The question shaped like it didn't matter much either way. Like, what comes next? For you. He pulled out what he needed and set it on the counter. I have something in mind, he said. She laughed softly. It was a small sound, almost fond, the laugh of a person who found something a little sweet and a little sad. She turned back to her phone. Devante set a pan on the stove and turned on the flame. He said nothing more. Wednesday morning, Devante woke at his usual time. He made coffee. He set 2 mugs on the counter. He showered, dressed, and then sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of him and waited. Brianna came downstairs at 9. She was put together already. Hair done, a silk robe cinched at the waist, moving through the kitchen with the easy confidence of a woman who had decided what her life looked like, and was simply waiting for the remaining piece to rearrange themselves accordingly. She saw the 2 mugs and paused for half a second. Then she poured herself a cup. You're off today? She asked. Took a personal day. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down. We need to talk about moving forward. Something in her relaxed when he said it. He could see it happen. A small, almost imperceptible release in her shoulders. She wrapped both hands around her mug and sat down across from him with the composed, patient expression of a woman who had been waiting for this particular conversation and felt entirely prepared for it. She thought she knew what was coming. He could see that too. "Okay," she said. "I think that's good. I think it's time." He nodded once. Then he opened the folder and placed the first page on the table and turned it to face her. She looked down at it. It was the bank records. Every transaction. 37 rows, each one a date, an amount, a transfer notation. The total at the bottom, circled in pen, $6,200. Chapter. 90 days, Devante said. Small enough each time that it wouldn't flag anything. Started in August. He let her look at it. The same month the messages started. Brianna's eyes came up slowly. He placed the second set of pages on top of the first. The screenshots, printed clean, timestamps running down the right margin in a neat column. The contact name Mona visible at the top of each thread, and Raymond Ashford's face in the profile photo, clear enough that there was no room to question it. She looked at the photo. Her jaw tightened. She said nothing. 4 months, Devante said. The first message is dated 6 weeks before your surgery was finished healing. He pointed to the timestamp without touching the page. I was still on double shifts then. 6 days a week. He said it plainly, without drama. I sold my truck in July to cover the last of the cost. That was my father's truck. We rebuilt it together before he passed. I never told you that. He paused. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel bad about it. I wanted you to just have the thing you asked for. Brianna set her mug down. Her hands were very still. He turned to the third page. The legal documentation. Adaise's structured summary. Clean and formal. The house, purchased with Devante's credit and down payment, legally titled in his name. The transferred funds identified as a pre-settlement draw against any marital claim she might file. The house is mine, he said. My attorney has confirmed it. The money you moved, that's your portion. It's already been accounted for. He let that settle. There's nothing left to negotiate. He slid the separation agreement across the table. 4 pages. Signature line at the bottom. Brianna stared at it. When she finally spoke, her voice had a tight, careful quality, like a woman trying to keep something from showing. You can't just... This isn't how this works, Dev. I have rights. I've been in this marriage for 5 years. You have, he said. And for most of those 5 years, I gave you everything I had. I worked without complaining. I paid for what you asked for. He looked at her steadily. But you were already planning to leave while I was doing it, and you told Raymond that I would never see it coming. He let one beat pass. You said it like it was useful, like my trust was something you could factor into a plan. The color shifted in her face. Raymond will take care of me, she said. The words came out fast, almost reflexive, an exit she had been holding in reserve. He's building something. We have plans. Devante looked at her without blinking. Raymond hasn't closed a deal in 4 months, he said. He has a civil lawsuit filed against him by a former client. Misrepresentation. And his real estate license is currently under state board review. He said each item the same way he had said everything else. Level, unhurried, like a man reading measurements off a wall. He doesn't have plans. He has projections he can't close and debt he can't service. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Brianna sat very still. He watched her move through each of the places she might go, watched the arguments form and dissolve behind her eyes, one after another. The composed, unhurried woman who had sat down across from him 10 minutes ago was gone. What was left was something stripped down and searching, working through the wreckage of a plan she had believed was airtight. Her hand moved to her phone on the table. She picked it up. Brianna's thumb found the screen before she even looked at it. She was already dialing. The hallway door opened. Aunt Pat stepped through it. Brianna's thumb stopped. The phone stayed at her ear for one suspended second, then came down slowly, like something that had lost its purpose. She set it on the table and stared at her aunt the way a person stares at something they cannot immediately make sense of. Pat was dressed plainly. Dark slacks, a cream blouse, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked exactly like herself, because she always did, regardless of the room she walked into. She carried no drama, no performance, just the particular weight of a woman who had decided something and arrived to say it. She looked at Brianna first. Brianna's mouth opened. "Aunt Pat." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Why are you here?" "Devante asked me to come," Pat said. I said yes. She pulled out the chair beside Devante and sat down. That was all it took. That single motion, the scrape of the chair, the settling of her weight, the placement of her folded hands on the table beside the man Brianna had spent 4 months treating like a problem to be managed. And something in the room shifted completely and permanently. Brianna looked from Pat to Devante and back again. A muscle worked in her jaw. "This is not," she started. "He called you here to make me look bad." "That's what this is." Pat shook her head once. Not defensively, just factually. "I'm here because he told me the truth," she said. "And because I already knew most of it." "You don't know?" "I know you told me you were unhappy 3 months before that surgery," Pat said. Her voice was even. Not cold, not raised, just clear. The way a woman is clear when she has already done the hard work of deciding. "I told you that Devante was a good man, and that unhappiness is something you work on, not something you run from. You looked at me and changed the subject." Brianna shook her head. "That's not how that conversation went." "It is exactly how it went." Pat did not blink. "I was there. I was going through something. I was still dealing with everything from before. You know what I was going through. I know what you were going through," Pat said. And for the first time something softer moved through her voice. Not softness that forgave. Softness that remembered. "I held your hand through that. So did Devante. That man sat in a hospital with you, drove you to every appointment, never once made you feel like a burden." She let one beat pass. "And then you sat across from me and told me you were glad he was the type who would never see it coming. You said it like it was lucky, like his trust was just a—" She paused, searching for the exact word. "A convenience." The word landed flat and final. Brianna's face changed. "That is not what I meant by that," she said. But her voice had lost its edge. It came out defensive now, the way voices do when the argument is already over and the speaker hasn't caught up yet. "Maybe not," Pat said. "But it's what you said." "Aunt Pat." Brianna leaned forward. When she spoke again, her voice carried something new. A pleading quality she had been too composed to use until now. "I'm your family. You came here and you sat down next to him. Do you understand what that looks like? You're supposed to be on my side." Pat was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, it was without apology and without cruelty. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since the day you were born, and I will love you until I'm in the ground. That is not the question." She looked directly at her niece. "But I will not lie for you. I will not sit here and pretend I did not see what I saw, or hear what I heard, or watch you take everything that man gave you and treat it like it was owed to you." She settled her hands on the table. "That is not love. That is covering for something wrong. And I won't do it." Brianna sat back. She opened her mouth once, closed it, looked at Devante, who had not spoken since Pat sat down, and then looked back at the separation agreement still lying in front of her. She had come to this table with a structure, a story, an arrangement of facts that put her at the center in a particular way. She had come prepared for a difficult conversation with a man she believed she understood completely. She had not prepared for this. She did not have a version of events that could survive her own aunt sitting down beside the man she betrayed and refusing to move. She picked up the pen. She signed her name at the bottom of the page. 4 neat letters. Then, the last name. The one she had been planning to take back anyway. She pushed the pages back across the table. Then she stood up, and without looking at either of them, she walked down the hall and through the front door, pulling it shut behind her with a soft, final click. The house went quiet. Devante sat at the table for a moment without moving. He looked at the signed pages. He looked at his hands. Then he pushed back his chair, carried the 2 mugs to the sink, and washed them both clean. He dried them, set them back in the cabinet. He climbed the stairs, lay down on top of the covers, and closed his eyes. The yard smelled like charcoal and cut grass. Devante had done the landscaping himself. Stone path along the left side, edged clean. A row of ornamental grasses along the back fence that had taken 2 full weekends and 1 badly pinched finger to plant. A small garden bed in the corner. Nothing fancy, just tomatoes and a few herbs he actually used. The grass was level and green, the kind of green that came from showing up with a sprinkler on a Tuesday morning before work, because you decided something was worth the effort. He had decided a lot of things were worth the effort these days. "I'm just saying," Deja said, turning her paper plate toward Walter like she was presenting evidence. "If you put coleslaw directly on top of the pulled pork, it is objectively better. That is not an opinion. That is a fact." Walter looked at her plate with the expression of a man who had made his peace with being wrong but refused to admit it out loud. "That is not a fact," he said. "That is something people tell themselves. People with taste," Deja said. "People who have given up." Devante laughed. Not a polite laugh, not the kind he used to manage social situations. A real one, from somewhere low in his chest. The kind that came easy now because it wasn't working against anything. He turned back to the grill. 6 burgers, 2 for Deja, who had announced this at arrival without being asked. The charcoal was settled into a good, even burn. Not too hot, not struggling. He had learned years ago that the fire did the work if you set it up right. You just had to be patient enough to let it. He had gotten better at that too, at letting things work the way they were built to work without forcing them. The field supervisor position had come through 8 months after the separation finalized. He had started the project management certification during the documentation period. Something to do with his hands in the evenings when the house was quiet and sitting still felt like too much. He had not done it for strategy. He had done it because forward movement was the only direction he knew how to sustain. The job came with salary, benefits, and a company truck. He parked it in the driveway every evening next to the spot where his father's restored Chevy used to sit. He did not think about that often. When he did, it did not break him. It just reminded him of what things cost and why the cost had been worth paying. Not to Brianna, but to himself, to the kind of man he was. He had started therapy in the spring. Not because something was broken, because he had a systems mind, and he understood that every system worth maintaining required regular inspection, honest diagnosis, and the occasional willingness to open up the panel and look at the wiring. He went on Thursday evenings. He was honest in the room. It helped in the way that honest maintenance always helps, quietly and over time. Aunt Pat still met him for coffee every few weeks. She had never made a ceremony of it. She simply called, named a place, and showed up. The way she did everything. She was the one who told him about Raymond. The licensing board review had moved faster after the documentation Devante provided. The suspension came down 4 months after Brianna walked out the front door. 60 days, which in that industry was enough to crater a client roster that was already barely standing. The income dried up. The leased car went back. 3 of the contracts he had been spinning fell apart inside of a month. Brianna had moved in with Raymond first. Then, when that stopped being a viable situation, She moved in with a cousin. She worked at a boutique now, somewhere on the east side. Pat had mentioned it once without editorializing, the way Pat mentioned everything, plainly, and then moved on. She was still striking. That part was true, and would probably always be true. But striking, Devante had come to understand, was not the same as solid, and visible was not the same as present. She had wanted a life people could see. What she had built instead was a surface with nothing behind it holding it up. He did not say any of this out loud. He did not need to. He simply knew. And knowing was enough. Deja was looking at him from her lawn chair. "Those burgers ready, or are you just out there having a personal moment?" "Both," he said. Walter made a sound that was almost a laugh. Devante pressed the back of the spatula lightly against the top patty and listened to the sizzle, steady, even, and right on time. He looked out past the grill at the yard he had designed and planted and leveled and edged with his own 2 hands. The ornamental grasses moved in the warm evening air. The tomato plants were climbing their stakes. The stone path caught the low light and held it. He flipped the burgers. He felt, without making a speech about it, without needing anyone to confirm it, like a man who owned everything in his life, because he did. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.